bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue à la 8e édition de la Réunion internationale des alumni de cette maison. Mon nom est Karine Leu, je suis responsable des relations avec nos anciennes et anciens élèves. Vous êtes déjà une petite poignée, une vingtaine dans cette salle, sur les 260 inscrits à cette partie de la journée. Donc je ne doute absolument pas que cette salle se remplira au fur et à mesure de la journée et surtout lorsque nous recevrons M. Rafael Grossi, directeur général de l'Agence internationale de l'énergie atomique à 15h. Quant à vous, étudiants et alumni qui êtes déjà en ligne, vous étiez plus de 110 à être inscrits lorsque nous avons bouclé les analyses jeudi midi. Vous êtes maintenant encore plus nombreux puisque vous avoisinez les 200. Donc je vous remercie d'être connectés avec nous du monde entier et je tiens à saluer tout particulièrement la présence d'un de nos alumnus en Afghanistan. Et il se reconnaîtra. Et vous dire que même si effectivement, physiquement, nous sommes loin de vous, nous sommes tout particulièrement avec vous en pensée aujourd'hui. Vous êtes ainsi 11% à être connectés depuis l'Asie, 10% depuis l'Afrique, 17% depuis l'Europe, 15% depuis l'Amérique du Nord, 7% depuis l'Amérique latine et quand même 40% depuis la Suisse. Pour cette journée consacrée à nos alumni et alumnas, nous allons voir le programme qui va s'afficher derrière moi. J'ai le clicker. J'ai pas de clicker. Non, voilà, merci beaucoup. Donc pour cette journée, nous allons effectivement reconnaître, donc le but de la journée c'est de reconnaître les réalisations et les accomplissements de nos alumni et donc voici l'agenda de la journée. D'abord, dans quelques minutes, l'Assemblée générale menée par Jennifer Blanquet, qui est membre du comité de l'association et qui est aussi une ancienne présidente. À 14h, nous aurons une présentation des réformes en cours à l'Institut par notre directrice qui est arrivée il y a 1 an, Madame Marie-Laure Salles. Son intervention sera suivie d'une session de questions-réponses avec Grégoire Mallard, le directeur de la recherche, et avec Hakim Venman, le directeur des partenariats stratégiques, qui lui aussi est un alumnus. Enfin, nous aurons l'immense joie et honneur d'accueillir à 15h M. Rafael Grossi, directeur général de l'AIEA, pour une discussion avec Grégoire Mallard sur The Future of Nuclear Energy, How to Ensure its Safety, Non-diversion and Support for Sustainability in the 21st Century. Nous clorons ainsi la partie ici à la Maison de la Paix et nous vous recevrons ensuite à la nouvelle résidence du Grand Moraillon qui est située à la rue Michel-Nicot numéro 8. Donc vous montez la rue de Ferney en direction de l'Intercontinental que vous laissez sur votre gauche et un peu plus haut à droite, vous avez la route des Morillons. Vous la prenez, deuxième chemin sur votre droite, c'est la rue Michel-Nicot. Et donc que le nom de la rue de notre nouvelle résidence soit celui d'une femme libraire, éditrice et imprimeuse de la fin du XVIe siècle, début du XVIIe. Personnellement, je trouve que c'est un très très beau symbole. À 17h et 18h, vous pourrez effectuer les visites de ce bâtiment. Vous pourrez découvrir les différents espaces communs à disposition des étudiants. Vous verrez les appartements et vous comprendrez surtout la philosophie qui a guidé la conception de l'architecte Kengo Kuma. Dès 19h, nous serons sur la terrasse de la résidence pour l'apéritif et le dîner de gala qui suivra, au cours duquel les Alumni Awards seront remis et la tombola tirée. Donc sur ce, je n'en dis pas plus. J'espère simplement que vous aurez autant de plaisir à partager cet événement avec nous que nous en avons eu à le préparer pour vous. J'appelle maintenant Jennifer Blanquet, spécialiste du développement et des questions de compétitivité, vice-présidente Agriculture, Human and Social Development à la Banque africaine de développement de 2017 à 2020, Growth Council member du Canada de 2016 à 2019, directrice et économiste senior du Global Competitiveness Network du World Economic Forum de 2012 à 2017. Le parcours de Jennifer nous donne le tournis. Titulaire d'un master en affaires internationales de l'Université de Columbia, ainsi que d'un master et d'un doctorat de l'Institut, Jennifer est aujourd'hui membre de plusieurs boards, parmi lesquels l'International Science Program en Suède, le Syngenta Foundation à Bâle, le Women Political Leaders en Belgique, et puis surtout, elle est également la Non-Executive Director de l'African Risk Capacity Group. Jennifer, merci.
Thanks, Corinne. I wasn't sure if I was speaking from here or from someplace else, but maybe I'll walk. Actually, can I have a mic? Because it might be easier for me to just kind of stroll around. I'll start here, but it's just nicer to not stand behind the podium because we're all colleagues here. So delighted to be here, and I think perhaps most importantly, a friend of the Institute and of Karine. Really excited to be here because I think, as you'll see, a lot has been going on at the Institute. I'm not sure if that was, I think we're missing some slides.
No, it's the first one.
Is it? Okay, is it the first one? Okay, maybe it's shorter than it was. But in any event, I'm going to show you some of the really great things that have been happening. And, you know, just the progress, I think, that the Institute's been making in terms of getting its alumni engaged, working on really key topics, really expanding around the world, and obviously in very close collaboration with Karine, which is always a pleasure. So that's the committee. I know some of them are online, and our president, Natalie Africa, would have loved to be here, but she's in South Africa. It was just too hard, I think, to get here this year. Jason is the vice president. Also, he's been very involved in putting this together, and I think he's traveling right now, but otherwise would certainly be here, and we've all promised each other that we'll be here next year. Ting in China. We have Fred Santerre, who's been on the committee as long as I have for a very long time. Jessica Byron, who's representing us in the Caribbean, and Walid, who's also here and has a long experience in international organizations. Finally, Brad, who is in Canada. And some of us are leaving the committee and some are coming on, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So I think, you know, we're very excited just about, in general, celebrating our global alumni. I used to always say that the Graduate Institute is the greatest school that, well, not no one's ever heard of, but that not enough people had heard of. And I think we're having more and more traction. We know it's a great school, and more amazing alumni that are kind of rising to very interesting positions. And tonight, for those of you who are going to join us at the gala, you're going to see some very interesting ones. I won't go into the details now. And really, I mean, our job is just to get the word out about how great a school it is, make sure that we're connecting the alumni. We're a bunch of volunteers, and just think that it's a great school. We're so happy to have gone here. We have so many great memories, and we want to make sure that that kind of reaches as many as possible. And here you do see our reach. I have to say, when we started this about 8 years ago, this was not a map that looked like this. And it's a combination of, in red, the chapters. So those are proper chapters that meet, come up with programs, and so on and so forth, as well as ambassadors. Often the ambassadors then turn into chapters, right? So often you'll have an ambassador, and then they're able to regroup other alumni to basically, you know, come together and do the outreach at that level. We had this year 2 new chapters and 10 new ambassadors. So this is something that's really taking off. And our strategy has really been about getting out there. We've been having more and more calls, you know, with alumni and with the chapters. And you can see that if you look over, you know, the past, 10 years or so, it's been quite remarkable. And even if you just look over the last 4 years or so, we've had an incredible increase in representatives. People are really engaged with the Institute, and when we have calls, you see that they really are engaged, they're very committed, but also our LinkedIn group members. And we know that a lot of going to school, it's about learning, but it's also about getting a job and, you know, kind of furthering your career afterwards. So, you know, LinkedIn is a very important tool, and it's basically been taking off, and 20% increase over just the last 4 years is pretty impressive. So some of the highlights, and I might not go through every single one of them, but just to give you a sense, I mean, the committee is regularly meeting, that's not surprising. We've been meeting with the new director of the Institute, Marie-Laure Salles, especially around her new strategy, just to make sure that we understand where things are going and how we can support. because there's no point in being an alumni association that is off doing its own thing. It's all about, you know, kind of helping the Institute to continue to grow. It's the 8th year of the Alumni Reunion, as Karine mentioned, which is pretty impressive. I remember the first one, and it's grown. Some of you might too as well. I know Jacques Morillon does remember. And so it's really what we're doing over time. And then the Alumni Awards, of which we're going to have 4 tonight. It is the 6th year that we're carrying them out. And you know, it's exciting every year. Every year you're worried that you won't be able to come up with new people, and every year we come up with some great new names. So we've had chapter heads calls, I've already mentioned that. This year, and I think, you know, COVID, it's been a terrible experience in many ways, but it's also been an accelerator for innovation. So we've been doing a lot more, understanding that we couldn't do everything physically here. So we had the first year of the Geneva Roundtable. It was partly physical, partly virtual, mostly virtual, where we really did bring a symposium together on key topics, and it was very popular. It's certainly something I think that we will continue to do. We've continued to give out prizes and scholarships, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And then Karine has been helping on these really important efforts around Inspire. So Inspire students, Inspire alumni, really around, looking at sharing interests. Again, we had to do more, I think, to get people together, given that we weren't able to physically see each other. So a lot going on either with Inspire students around, connecting them with the alumni about the sorts of things that they might want to do around job search, and similarly, for Inspire alumni around job reconversion and how do you think about the job market. Because I think we have an amazing network among us if we just tap into it. So again, everything went virtual this year, and there were a lot of really interesting activities going on. I think this is just the ones that we know about. But the Paris chapter basically did an interesting symposium on international law addressing climate change, a big issue. The South Africa chapter was looking at COVID-19 in Africa. For those of you who are Africa watchers like myself, big question, and why are they doing so well in some areas, and what can be learned elsewhere? Why are they having challenges in certain countries compared to the rest of Africa? The Washington chapter, not surprisingly, given that you have the sister organizations there, we're looking at things like, can finance reduce inequality? San Francisco chapter, yes, we have a San Francisco chapter, was looking at, this is kind of almost too intellectual for me, but failure and collapse, anthropological and historical insights and lessons for the future. But very interesting, and you can imagine, I think, a lot of very compelling discussions taking place out there, and we're very excited to make this grow. And by the way, if anybody in the room has ideas of similar things to do, please let us know. Now, I won't go into all the details of Geneva Roundtable because I'm assuming that most of us are from Geneva, and you might have seen that. For those of you online, I'm sure a lot of you actually probably also dialed in like I did. But basically, what we did was we had a number of speakers who came in, and it was all around, basically, how do you engage with the public on issues that are really important of the day, right? And so, I don't know. Karine, that was your baby. It went really well. We were really happy about that, and I think we need to do a lot more. We now have this beautiful building. We can do a lot more on the topic. Now, scholarships and prizes, we've continued to roll out. The Alumni Scholarship is something that we established back in 2013. And this year we had Dong Kai Chen, who's in international law, who actually received that one. And you can see nice things that he has said about his excitement about coming to the Graduate Institute. The Washington, D.C. chapter has for a very long time been providing their own scholarship, and they have been providing one this year to Kulani Abendroth-Diaz, who's in her PhD in International Relations and Political Science. The New York Alumni Chapter actually started doing this recently as well, and so they're supporting Prachi Jha from India, and she's working on development studies. So we're kind of covering different areas. That's what we tried to help them do, was to make sure that they were covering different areas that the Institute covers. And then the prize for best thesis, which we normally give out at the gala. I'm not sure if we're able to do that. We're unfortunately not able to do that this year. But it went to Barry Sander for his thesis on doing justice to history. And again, in history, sort of, around international criminal courts. So quite an interesting area, and we're always very happy to do that. Now, the status of our accounts are pretty low, because as you know, we don't collect dues anymore. So the Alumni Committee is working with Karine and the Institute to make sure that we replenish that, because we would like to continue giving out the Best Thesis Prize. And basically the modalities are being worked out. And by the way, I mean, for those of you who have been here for a while, we made a decision as the alumni, not just the committee, but as the alumni to do that, to run down the accounts, because we thought no better use of it. But now we do have to replenish. We need to replenish it. So just a few words on priorities for the next year. I mean, we're going to continue doing a lot of what we've been doing. If you see the impressive increase in basically uptake around the world in alumni engagement, it seems the strategy is working pretty well. So we want to keep pushing in that direction. So we'll keep basically working on the Alumni Reunion, ensuring that we get more and more people together. We really hope that next year we can do a lot more people physically here, and maybe we won't even be wearing masks. I guess we'll have to see. I have a feeling we will, but not sure. We're going to continue, basically pushing, for chapter creation, and also supporting them in the activities that they're carrying out. We're going to do more with the Geneva chapter, because there's so many here in Geneva from the Institute, and such an opportunity to do more. Geneva roundtable, a lot more on that. Now, the second thing is around, so that's all about engaging the alumni community. The second is basically ensuring that we're creating links between the Institute and the alumni. And here, basically, we're in regular discussions with the director about her strategy and vision for the school, to make sure that we can support, what she's rolling out and what the staff is rolling out here. Continuing to, push for professor alumni connections, trying to make sure we know their schedules when they're traveling, so that they can do some great engagement in different parts of the world while the professors are traveling. Continue to sort of support recruitment of students, and again, we want to basically encourage more and more scholarships. There's parts of the world that it's just really become too expensive to come here. We've seen a huge drop. I don't know if it's gotten a little bit better recently, but in African enrollment, for example, and it's very worrisome. So it's something that I think we need to keep pushing on pretty hard. And finally, supporting networking with students. I mean, that's pretty obvious, because they really do need our support as they're trying to make their next decisions on what they're going to do. We haven't been able to figure out the perfect mentoring program yet, but we're still looking at that. And we would certainly reach out to engage those of you who are very involved to help us to do that once it is properly set up. We're sort of testing out different ideas, and I do hope that that will happen eventually. And I do believe that tonight, in terms of engagement, I mean, normally we would have roundtables. We do a lot of things here. We just can't this year, because it's too dangerous for people to be inside. But for those who can show a COVID certificate, I understand, Karine, are invited at 11 o'clock tonight-ish.
Yeah, it would be hard because of COVID stuff.
Okay.
We couldn't just
Open to everybody.
so yeah.
There'll be a few who might come in order to engage. So we'll see. I mean, it's very difficult right now. So we keep exploring ways to engage more with the young people. Yeah, and they're around. So please talk to them if you see them around, because they would love to engage. And you have some of them, I think, here, helping us out. And so what we need to do today is, there's a few of us who have to step down because we've done so many years. And we have 3 wonderful new committee members who are going to be representing different sectors, different parts of the world. So there's Brendusa Burrows, who basically is, I see her as a serial entrepreneur who's an expert on sustainable finance. And she is going to be, she's joining, well, as long as you guys all agree. We'll do that by acclamation as soon as I've presented everybody. She'll be joining this year. Marcus Torino, who is head of strategic response to Latin America Facebook, so really bringing in that social media perspective and representing that part of the world. And finally, Jasmine, who's right here and who works a lot on diversity and inclusion, which we know is a very important topic, and also is a former colleague from way, way back at the World Economic Forum, and I'm just so excited that she's joining. So please, I guess, let me stop there. And I need to ask whether we have, I'm never sure exactly how to do this, Karine. Can we have a show of hands for those who would agree that these can be joining? Yes, yay! We don't have a real vote, right? I mean, we just want to make sure we have people representing different parts of the world, and Jasmine will keep us on the straight and narrow in terms of diversity and inclusion, because she thinks about that all the time. So I think that is my last slide. So with that, actually, Jasmine, if you could come up to the stage, or is it Karine? I think Jasmine first. Yeah. Yeah, because Jasmine, can you come up and say a few words about yourself, since...
Thanks so much, Jennifer, for having me, and thank you to all of you for accepting me to the Alumni Association. I've graduated back in 2007, and ever since, the Graduate Institute has been very close to my heart, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to contribute to nurture the community, not only in Geneva, but also globally. So thanks a lot. And with that pass of relais, I'm also actually saying thank you to our outgoing committee members, Frédéric Santerre and Brad Ryder. They have done a great job of contributing to the Alumni Association, so thank you very much. And then I'm also coming to a very special thank you, and for that I would also like Karine to come up, to you, Jennifer, for your outstanding contribution and work with the committee.
Voilà, Jennifer. Donc, au nom du comité de l'Institut, nous aimerions particulièrement te dire notre reconnaissance pour ton engagement indéfectible et puis aussi pour ta motivation à faire bouger les lignes, que ce soit à l'Institut ou ailleurs. C'est très apprécié. Puis, on espère surtout pouvoir compter encore et toujours sur tes conseils avisés et puis ton amitié précieuse.
Merci beaucoup.
I don't know if we can take a picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here is our photographer.
I think that they just know I drink too much. Here, let me just put that here, though. But thank you. No, you guys, I mean, this is really, it's sad, you know, after you've spent 8 years. But it's
Yeah,
cool.
but you will stay around.
I know you guys aren't going to let me
As we have our
go.
previous presidents here, you'll stay
We
here.
we can create like a little committee.
Yeah, honorary
Yeah, we'll be
presidents.
like the emeritus. Anyway.
So here we are for you, in case you have questions. We are, the three of us, we are here. So please.
Ah si. Vous avez mentionné que Frédéric Santerre s'en va. Est-ce qu'elle est là aujourd'hui?
Non,
Okay.
malheureusement pas, elle est en France,
Ok,
à Arles.
merci.
Avec plaisir. Mais si vous voulez la contacter ou autre, c'est pour ça, on a ses coordonnées. Ok, alors il n'y a pas de problème, si vous voulez la reconnecter avec elle, il n'y a aucun problème.
Yeah, actually, I'll just say, I mean, nous sommes les deux seuls, en fait, du comité qui ont pu venir ici, parce que c'est vraiment compliqué en ce moment, comme vous savez. Alors, voilà. Mais ils sont avec nous en esprit, je suis sûre. Je les sens ici dans la salle.
Alain.
Merci. Je voudrais adresser mes compliments à Karine Leu, que je connais presque 30 ans, disons 29 ans. On a commencé ensemble. Sans elle, je crois que l'Alumni ne serait pas ce qu'elle est aujourd'hui. Et je voudrais un round of applause pour elle.
Merci
Here,
beaucoup.
here.
Merci Alain. Est-ce que vous avez
And
d'autres?
actually, if the Institute is listening, she could use a little more support. Right? A larger budget, more people. Anyway.
I have a precious team here. You'll know her tonight.
And Karine, it's not just the alumni, but also the students. Huh? Without you, it would not be possible. The experience as a student here and as an alumni.
Merci, merci beaucoup. Est-ce que vous avez des questions? Est-ce qu'on peut vous aider à en connaître un peu plus sur ce que nous faisons? Jacques? Pas de questions.
C'est fantastique. Je regrette qu'il n'y ait pas plus d'alumni genevois vivant à Genève qui se déplacent. J'ai remarqué que vous disiez que vous vouliez créer quelque chose ou renforcer les alumni genevois. D'une manière générale, je trouve que il y a tous ceux qui ne peuvent pas venir et qui aimeraient être ici. Alors bon, on a la toile aujourd'hui, mais je trouve franchement pas admissible que des alumni qui vivent à Genève n'abandonnent pas leur barbecue pour venir ici cet après-midi, même si c'est un peu tôt. Alors bon, ça ne sert pas à grand-chose que je le dise, mais enfin, comme ça, je l'aurais dit. Merci.
Alors, j'avoue qu'ils seront là pour le repas de gala, ils seront certainement là pour Monsieur Grossi, et pour l'AG, on va dire qu'ils sont en ligne, puisqu'ils sont inscrits. Et en tout cas, ils pourront la regarder lorsqu'ils le souhaiteront en replay, comme on dit aujourd'hui. Oui, monsieur, je vous en prie. Vous avez le micro qui va arriver sur votre gauche.
Merci. Vous avez mentionné le 100e anniversaire de l'Institut. Est-ce que nous parlons de 2027?
Tout à fait.
C'est ça?
Tout à fait.
Ok, donc dans un peu plus de 5 ans.
C'est ça. Donc, vous le verrez tout à l'heure lorsque notre directrice vous présentera un peu les réformes en cours. Elle a d'immenses projets pour le 100e et normalement, on devrait s'y mettre dès 2022 et notamment avec votre appui.
Ok, merci.
D'autres questions? On est là pour vous. Oui, madame.
Vous avez parlé des bourses pour les fellowships. Est-ce que vous pouvez indiquer un tout petit peu les critères pour poser la candidature pour un fellowship comme ça?
Tu veux répondre?
Well, in general, first of all, it's the different chapters that decide, although we try to guide them, and then we have our, it's for trying to cover different topics, I mean, different areas, but also just really top-notch students who have a financial need from different parts of the world. I think there's no specific box-ticking exercise, but, and I think also it's not just in 1 year. We're trying to make sure over a certain number of years that we'll hit international law, we'll do development, we'll do economics, history.
En fait, les demandes de bourse arrivent tout au même endroit et en fait, elles sont analysées par le comité des professeurs et un comité des bourses. Et ensuite, les attributions sont faites, effectivement. Si d'autres bourses demandent des critères, eh bien, on va les donner aux étudiants qui cochent les cases. Et puis, effectivement, peut-être que d'autres étudiants qui ne cocheraient pas les cases d'autres bourses obtiendraient celles que nous proposons. Vous allez voir, lorsque vous allez sortir, il y a le programme de la journée que Lucille vient d'apporter. Et dans ce programme, vous avez les notices biographiques des 4 étudiants qui ont reçu les bourses cette année. Donc vous verrez leur profil. Si vous venez ce soir, en tout cas 2 d'entre eux seront là. L'un est resté bloqué en Chine et la deuxième ne se sent pas bien aujourd'hui. Mais en tout cas 2 d'entre eux seront là. Et quant au prix que nous avons mentionné tout à l'heure et dont Jennifer a parlé, il est remis à la cérémonie de graduation. Donc en fait, il a été remis il y a 2 semaines. Et Barry Sander, que vous avez vu en photo, est venu de Leiden pour le recevoir. d'autres questions? Oui?
I will say it in English. I'm Mariana. I'm a current student, MIA, second year. And I wanted to know more about the mentorship program that you're having. I mean, now I'm a mentor for first-year students, and then they have many doubts, and I have professional experience, yes, but I want to know, like, how can we work together, the students that are second years, already graduated, with the alumni.
I'll start and Karine will finish, maybe. Look, we have been talking about this for the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, really trying to find a good way, and we haven't figured out a perfect way, because I think we all mentor in different ways. Officially, less officially, we sponsor. We have to find a way to make it workable so that it is not too onerous for the mentor, but really provides value for the mentee. And so I think we've had a few ideas. We've tested them. They haven't worked exactly what we wanted. We're looking at partnerships because we don't necessarily want to do everything on our own. I think give us another, and then there's COVID, right? So that made everything harder. So give us another year or so, and I think we'll have something. I don't know if...
Yeah, and especially we need the platform, because you cannot match people by hand. So you can match 5 pairs, 10 pairs max, but it's a huge work. So we need to have a platform that can do the matching in between the people.
Yeah, and if you have ideas, please don't hesitate to share, so we can benefit also from your experience.
With pleasure. Thank you, Mariana. Est-ce qu'on a d'autres questions? Non? Si ce n'est pas le cas, je pense qu'on va lever la séance et puis on va se retrouver d'ici 20 petites minutes avec notre directrice, Madame Marie-Laure Salles. Merci beaucoup pour votre présence. Donc, bonjour et bienvenue aux nouveaux arrivants, que vous soyez en ligne ou en présentiel. Comme vous le savez, Madame Marie-Laure Salles est directrice de l'Institut depuis le 1er septembre 2020. Elle a quitté son mandat de doyenne de l'École de Management et de l'Innovation de l'Institut d'études politiques de Paris, qu'elle exerçait depuis 2016, pour nous rejoindre. Auparavant, elle a été professeure au sein du département Management à l'École supérieure des sciences économiques et commerciales, l'ESSEC, et dirigeait le centre de recherche sur le capitalisme, la globalisation et la gouvernance. Elle a fait partie du comité de pilotage du panel international sur le progrès social, une sorte de GIEC du progrès social qui réunit quelques 300 scientifiques du domaine. Elle a été professeure invitée aux universités de Stanford, Uppsala, Stockholm, Bocconi, et elle a même enseigné à l'université de Lucerne. Elle a été nommée chevalier de la Légion d'honneur en 2017. Docteur en sociologie de Harvard, Marie-Laure Salles a beaucoup étudié la globalisation et les transformations sociétales. Parmi les nombreux ouvrages qu'elle a publiés figure Exporting the American Model, qui lui a valu d'obtenir de l'Association américaine de sociologie le prix Max Weber du meilleur livre sur la sociologie des organisations. Elle va vous présenter les réformes en cours à l'Institut. Madame Marie-Laure Salles.
Merci, chère Karine. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, maybe, for some of you, or good evening who are online. So a very warm welcome to all of you who are here, present today. It's a great pleasure to finally have this meeting, at least partly in physical form, and to have the opportunity to also meet quite a number of you tonight during dinner. So it's a great pleasure for all of us to have this, my first rentrée for real, I would say, because last year was a bit different, as you know. A very warm welcome again to all of you online, and I'm also very much looking forward to the time when we can travel a bit more, and when I can, go around and meet some of you also physically, because it makes a huge difference, obviously, to meet for real. So this day is a day for you, alumni and alumnae, as a community, to meet again or new for the first time, to exchange, to discuss, but it's also a day for you to reconnect with the Institute, with the ways in which it's evolving, with our projects, our challenges, and our hopes. And in the process, what we hope is that you will nurture your pride, your sense of belonging. You know that in a bit more than 5 years from now, the Institute will turn 100. And what I will be proposing in the coming months, as we will be able to present the final version of our strategic plan, is that we write a new page together, a new page for the Institute going towards its next 100. What better challenge than to reinvent yourself while naturally staying true to your own deep identity when you are turning 100? This new page, I think that we can only write it together, and I really hope that we can do so as an extended community. We will be needing you in many different ways, and if I may, we are all in this together. The Institute is a gem. This is very clear to me. It was clear to me when I joined it last year. It's even more clear to me 1 year later. It has never been as relevant as today in the context of the global challenges that are ours to share. And the idea is therefore to work together to push up the Institute fully where it belongs as a premier higher education institution with a focus on global challenges and transnational collaboration and governance as the go-to point if you want to study, to do research, or gain and develop expertise on all those issues. I would like today to outline for you where we stand. As I mentioned, I will only be able to present a full version of our strategic project at the end of November, once it's been formally discussed and validated by our Conseil de Fondation. But today, I would like to present some of the key directions, some of the work in progress that we're involved in as a community at the Institute, and some of the projects that will already, I think, give you a sense of where we are going. Before that, I would like to give very warm thanks to a number of people. First of all, to Karine and her team. Where is Karine? She's here. A very, very warm thank you to Karine for making it all happen, for bringing us back together to this year for real. So thank you very much, Karine. I would also like to thank my colleagues, Laurence, as always, because without Laurence, I think the Institute doesn't work, as simple as that. And Grégoire and Hakim, who will be joining me later on the stage. So Grégoire, who is, maybe Grégoire, you stand up. I don't know if there's a camera somewhere so that everybody can see you. Grégoire Mallard is the new, well, for 1 year now, so not so new anymore, Director of Research at the Institute. And as I mentioned before, we are really working as teams. And Hakim Venman, who, again, the new Director of Partnership, so this time really new, Director of Partnership working with me on strategic partnership developments at the Institute. So thank you to both of them. They'll join me during the questions and answer session so that we can all try to address your questions if you have some. Let me also give a big thank you to Nathalie and to all members of your committee, of the Committee of the Alumni. I have to say that I've been impressed by the enthusiasm, by the energy, by the positive reactivity and proactive involvement of the committee with me, with all the projects of the Institute over the last year. So really a warm thank you to all of them, because this is really heartwarming when you arrive in the new institutions to see that there's so much interest for what you're trying to do. So thank you very much. And finally, obviously, last but not least, a big thank you to all of you. I very often say that I'm proud of and amazed by our students, but I'm also, I should say we are also, extremely proud and impressed to have alumni and alumnae like you. So a big thank you for all of you for who you are, for being here today, and for all your support of the Institute. So let me now try to figure out where the pointer is. Oh, c'est là. So that I can share with you some news and some information on the Institute and where we stand. So I'll start with actually some figures and facts, because I think it's always nice to start with some figures and facts. So this is the Institute today. We are going to reach this year close to 1,300 students at the Institute. Not all physically present, because some of them are PhD students, but a great share of those students will be present. So this is quite a big increase from even 2 years ago. This year only the new incoming class is close to 500 students, and around 95% of them have arrived physically, which is a very clear sign that they want to be back in the classroom and they don't want to be behind their screens anymore. So this is really wonderful news. So an extreme, diversity, as you can see, 105 nationalities, which is quite amazing. They're coming from more than 800 universities across the world, so really an amazingly diverse group of students. So 63% women. This is not extremely strange if you look actually at the figures around the world today. University students are in large majority women across the world. This is really a general trend. In Europe, we are getting close to an average of 60% of university students being women across the world. So, there are obviously differences depending on what kinds of disciplines you're looking at, but overall, women are definitely highly present in the world of higher education today. So just a point on one of the reasons why we have more students this year than 2 years ago is that we've seen over the last 2 years a very significant increase in the number of candidates on the one hand. One of the explanations for this is that over the last 2 years, as we've had COVID, as we've had a number of our big competitors in the US, in the UK, relatively difficult to access for a number of students. It's been probably made more sense for students to join us and to come to the Institute. I think that another explanation is probably that more people are going on for, to study or to further study, waiting off the COVID period. So we've had a very big increase in the number of candidates, as you can see. Which explains why we have been able to get more students with absolutely no impact on the quality, obviously, quite to the contrary. We're getting more attractive, more selective, at the same time, going beyond the 1,000 mark, which I think is an important number for us to stay beyond. And as you know, more than 20 alumni across the world with 40 chapters. Another set of facts and figures is the number of recruiting we've done this year, which is quite amazing, again, in the context. So since I arrived, we've recruited 9 new faculty. Again, with, out of those 9 faculty, 7 women, so very proud of that. Young, very bright women coming and joining us as assistant professors, strengthening the faculty overall, but also going towards a more diverse faculty, not only in terms of gender, but as you can see also in terms of origins of our faculty. Today, the faculty at the Institute has 38% women overall, with still quite a difference when you look at full professors, professeur ordinaire on the one hand, where women are not yet as present as in the assistant and associate professor. And so this is going to be one of our challenges in the coming years, is to really, allow our younger women professor to really break the ceiling of the full professorship, help them go in that direction. So just a reminder, you know that we have 5 departments, probably very well aware of those 5 departments. All of you have been connected to those departments in one or the other. I'm not sure how aware you are the existing build-up of research centers at the Institute, so I just put them back here. As when you look at the themes of those research centers, what we realize is that definitely the Institute is at the core of some of the, hottest, most relevant, most important issues of the day, most, acute challenges of the day. I'll say a few more things on that later, and obviously Grégoire is also here to answer questions. This is also an attempt to represent the expertise of the Institute, going beyond just a list of centers. So this is what our professors are working on. This is what our PhD students are working on. This is what the Institute is known for, and this is what we want to obviously push the Institute further. And again, if you look at the list, you find obviously the themes of the research centers, but it goes beyond. And you realize here that we are very much at, again, the heart of what are the key issues today in the world. So relevance is one of the key terms that comes to mind, I think, very clearly when we look at the Institute. When I arrived last year, the first project I launched, and you probably have seen this, is for us to reflect on who we are in terms of our identity. And the project that we launched in last September was to think about that identity with two dimensions in mind. First, our heritage. Who are we historically? What are our heritages, in fact? And on the other hand, what are the challenges of the world, of the current world, where we need, in fact, to project maybe an adaptation of this heritage to the current challenges of our world? So how do we redefine our identity in the context of this changing world and changing challenges? So we launched, as you know, a major reflection on collective reflection on this. We had several working groups. We also connected to you as an alumni community to get your input at different moments. Just to remind us of this, which is really I think this was also one of the important discussions that we had last year, which is how does this double heritage of the Institute, we sometimes forget about the double heritage of the Institute. Yes, there's HEI, and its 1927, very famous creation, which will lead us into our 100 years in a few years. But there's also the EUED, which was created in 1961 and became part of the Institute through a merger in 2007. And those two DNAs, in fact, happen to be together at the heart of what makes the contemporary relevance of the Institute. So it's the global governance, the collaboration for peace of the HEI, together with a focus on development, and we would call it sustainable development today, which actually makes today our extreme relevance. And this is really how we worked in terms of the redefinition of our collective identity. Looking, and I'm going a bit fast here on, because maybe, those are really maybe less important, because this is really a summary of how we worked. So this was our reading of the big issues of the day, of the big trends that we are going to face, all of us collectively, not only the Institute, obviously, but all of us collectively in the coming years. So combining this double heritage with this reading, this particular reading of the world, led us, in fact, to project ourselves in this manner of a fluid coherence, which is to reinvent our identity and affirm our singular relevance in a changing world, to the Charter, which I think you've seen by now, and which was really a collective construction, where essentially we are reaffirming our role as an institute working on peace and on international collaboration for peace, but affirming also in the same breath that working on peace today and fighting for peace today implies a strong preoccupation for sustainability and equity questions and solutions, And this is really the way in which we want to project the Institute in the coming years, to really have this triangle of peace, equity, and sustainability, and insist on some key, in a sense, challenges that are really key challenges for us at the Institute because of who we are, to reinvent multilateralism. This is something you hear a lot in Geneva, but this is obviously something that is indeed one of the major challenges of the day. To rebuild trust in and of democracy, and to actually deal, this is probably the newest, in a sense, challenge for us at the Institute. Democracy and multilateralism have been old, challenges associated with the Institute. The last one, what I call the digital Janus, is a more recent one, but it's an extremely important one. So this notion that the digital technological revolution is at the same time probably one of the most amazing solutions to a number of issues and problems, but also a very problematic development with respect to a certain number of issues that are connected to what we work on, particularly democracy, particularly equities and equality, but also what impacts does it have on peace, what impact does it have on multilateralism, what impact does it have on everything else we're doing at the Institute, global health, etc., etc. So this notion of digital Janus is something that as a social science university, we are very well armed to approach this kind of paradoxical tension between, on the one hand, very positive developments, on the other hand, problematic issues, and this is something that we will put a lot of emphasis on in the coming years to really complement really what we've been doing in the past. And finally, last but not least, all this is about bringing back this notion that progress is for humanity, humanity being understood as inscribed in its biotop, in its environment, on this single planet that we have. There's no planet B, okay? So this kind of connection between the human species and its overall biotop is a very important one and will be a very important one at the Institute. So re-enchanting humanity in the sense of forgetting a bit about those dreams of transhumanism, which have led us in the past years to kind of forget that technology should be here, or economic development should be here for the well-being of the largest numbers of our species rather than the other way around. So replacing humanity at the center of all this is also something that we are very much intent on doing in the coming years. We had a keynote lecture for the Back to School a few days ago by Professor Felvin Sarr, who is a Renaissance man, if ever, an economist, a philosopher, but also a musician and a poet from Senegal, who came to talk to us about a rise in humanity. So we really launched this year along these lines. So this is really a bit the strategic map that we'll be following for the Institute in the coming years, and I'll tell you more about this in a few months. Some of the next steps, so some of those steps have already been engaged and are going to go on and to be continued in the coming months and years. So we've launched a set of program reforms with, in a sense, those four main objectives. First, to enhance excellence at all levels, input, quote-unquote, process and output. So this is really something that is behind all the reforms that we've launched in terms of our different programs at the Institute. Targeting coherence of those programs with this new identity and strategy projection. So obviously, if we have this charter as our compass, we have to take it seriously, and we have to create the coherence between it and our programs, between it and our research, between it and our processes, even at the level of organizational level. adapting the competencies of our students, participants to the challenges of the world that we identified. So this is also, one of the elements of the program reforms, and increasing our capacity to professionalize and therefore to place our students well in the different programs, whether it's at the master level or at the PhD level. So just to give you a sense, for example, of one of the most advanced reforms that we've done. Actually, we worked a lot on that reform in the last years, as the MINT program, the interdisciplinary program. So the main philosophy behind the reform of the program has been to take seriously this double heritage that I mentioned before, and to recognize that once you merge actually those two heritages, you actually hybridize them, and you should go all the way to affirm that this particular interface between those two heritages is what the Institute is all about. It's what our strength, our singularity, our intellectual singularity is all about. So this has led to the merger of what were two different programs. We had a program in international affairs and a program in development studies. So we've merged those two programs, and we are creating a core that is a common core that integrates the two heritages and into the challenges of today. And in parallel, the revamping and creation, in some cases, of seven over there specializations. Some of them were already existing, associated with one or the other program, and we are revamping them, we're transforming them, we're adapting them, and putting them in greater coherence with our overall positioning. And others are new. Human rights and humanitarianism, for example, is a new specialization. Global health is also a new specialization. It was a minor before, but we turned it into a specialization, and so is gender and race and diversity, which I don't see here, but should be. Oh, did we miss it? Yeah. Sorry, yeah, that's true. We missed it. Okay. So yeah, in fact, it's become, it's probably an old version of our main program. We've decided to move it from a transversal theme to a specialization. It should also remain in a transversal theme, but it became a specialization. So there's 7 specializations and not 6, as you can see here. Sorry about this. In parallel to this overall transformation of the structure and the curriculum, and this is really happening in the sense that we are going to be recruiting the next session, the next batch of students, the next promotion of students in a few months. So we are starting in the fall to recruit students who will enter this format next September. So it's really well advanced. In parallel to that, we are still in process of thinking about the same thing, but from a different perspective, from the perspective of what kinds of competencies should be at the core of our curricula, of our courses, of our professional development workshops, or whatever sets of things we're doing at the Institute. One way to represent this, and here again, in coherence with our new positioning, is to insist on thinking, acting, and dreaming, as I like to say it, for positive change. So this kind of triangle that is really at the heart of where we want to push our students and our participants, this imbrication of the 3 dimensions, and having for that triangle, in a sense, a mobilization both of the mind of our students, which will be a classical mobilization of the mind, as we've always done, but will also insist, critical thinking being, in a sense, a long tradition at the Institute, but will also insist on creativity to actually counterbalance maybe the too rational and two theoretical ways in which we might be teaching our students. And on the other hand, mobilizing the heart, insisting on forms of collaboration, so through project-based, etc., pedagogies, but also insisting, and this is a broader ambition at the Institute, insisting on the emotional, on the care dimension, on the empathy, as probably, there was an article in Forbes a few days ago on that saying, empathy is going to be the new competence of leadership, and I think that's actually probably the case. So care as this broader notion, as this broader definition of leadership for the coming years, I think this is certainly something that is going to be an important trend. And it's quite interesting, but we had worked on this, and then I met people from the WEF, and they had actually worked on similar kinds of set of competencies, and they had the three, they had the critical thinking, the collaboration, and the care. They didn't have so much the creativity, which is weird, but we were actually quite aligned in terms of the identification of the trends in terms of needed competencies. As part of the affirmation of this new identity, one other thing we've done is to launch, and you may have seen this because we communicated on this in the newsletter and in different places. We've launched 3 what we call target initiatives. So the notion of target initiative is to really kind of bring together all members of our community, students, faculty members, and personnel administratif, to actually make alive, in fact, our charter and our identity projection. And so we identified 3 themes that are really inscribed in our charter: gender diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and art and culture as a way to mobilize the heart, as a way to mobilize this emotional dimension and to bring along this empathy and care that I mentioned before. So we have, for each of those initiatives, we have a smaller group that is in charge, or pilot, in fact, of those initiatives. But the idea is really that the initiatives are very open, that everybody in our community comes with their projects. Obviously, the group is in charge of putting some order into that and to create some form of objectives and checking that we are reaching the objectives that we set ourselves, either for 1 year or for some of them in a longer time period. The idea also is that those initiatives are really very vertical in the sense that they will go all the way from focusing on what we do on research on those on those different themes. What do we do also in terms of our programs, teaching, etc. But also, what do we do on an everyday basis? Okay, what do we do with respect to sustainability when we think about our own carbon footprint when we travel for work, for example? So how do we actually include those kinds of questions in the discussions? And one more thing that I'm pre-announcing, in a sense, this is not yet fully official, but I think we are advanced enough that I can announce it. The creation that will be formalized probably around February of what we call la Fabrique de la Paix, the FAB, which is it's at one level, it's not really a creation. At one level, it's bringing together things that exist at the Institute and formalizing the role of the Institute as a bridge between all those things, a bridge between our different programs, a bridge between research on the one hand and expertise or engagement on the other hand, which takes many different forms at the Institute. It takes the form of what we call the capstone projects within our MINT programs, where our students are working in groups of 4 or 5 on projects that are given by some of our partners, international organizations, private firms, NGOs, etc. And our students work together with those partners for a number of months on concrete projects, developing concrete solutions, on the basis, obviously, and with the strength of research that is behind their training. So that's one form, but it takes obviously the form also of the work of many of our centers that are really engaged in bringing research to expert communities and vice versa, bringing expert communities into our discussions on research. A bridge, an integrator also between what we like to call critical and constructive thinking. Critical thinking, which is, again, a long tradition of the Institute, but today, in the current world, obviously more than ever, critical thinking is extremely important, but it's not enough. We also need to project ourselves into a constructive thinking about what will be, what should be the solutions to the current challenges of the world. Between utopia and realism, I mentioned that already, this idea that the Institute maybe needs to be a bit bolder in its utopian projection. The challenges of tomorrow are so acute that we probably need to go a bit further in terms of thinking differently, in terms of daring to think. And so this notion of realist utopia is really an interesting one, which also was mobilized by our speaker, Fervin Sarr, a few days ago. Between generations also, and that's also, between you, alumni, our students, between, decision makers that are in positions of having an impact on the world today, and a generation of students who is going to inhabit this world of tomorrow and has therefore the complete legitimacy to be involved in dreaming and thinking and acting on that world. So the FAB will be this. We'll come back with more information on concretely how it works. It's going to be a physical space. It's going to be symbolized by a physical space, but it's going to bring actually a lot of things that already exist at the Institute, and it's going to try to put them together to create the synergies, to create the interactive dynamics that will render what we do more visible, but also maybe generate new ideas, generate new projects, and we'll tell you more about this in a few months. And last but not least, as I mentioned, we are going to turn 100 in 5 years, so we are in the process of working not only on a single big party, which obviously will happen, but on working on really a plan to move up to those 5 years. So we are going to have a relatively ambitious strategic plan on the basis of some of the points that I mentioned here and others. And for this strategic plan, we are going to combine it with a fundraising campaign, which will launch again, 5 years just before our 100th anniversary, so in 2022. And in parallel to that, we are also thinking about a way to celebrate our intellectual diversity, our relevance, our impact on the world over the last 100 years. So we are going to launch collective work on some of the key intellectual moments of the Institute throughout the last 100 years. And here again, we'll tell you more. This is very much work in progress. We're working on the ways in which we are going to do that. So a lot of things. A lot of projects, a lot of things have been done in 1 year in spite of the weird conditions that were the conditions of last year. Still a lot remains to be done, but it's a very exciting time, I think, for the Institute with really this willingness to project ourselves where we should be in terms of our strength, our visibility, our relevance. We are really quite a unique place, and it's more relevant than ever, I think, today. So all your help, all your contributions will be very welcome, will be very needed. As I said before, we're in this together. This is really a common project, and I hope it really becomes a common project. So thank you very much. And now Grégoire and Hakim will join me, and I think we have a number of questions already. No? Oh, so 5 was just that I needed to shut up. Yes? Okay, that's good. So we have questions here in the room.
Thank you for this magnificent project. Will that be on a printed support, this presentation?
Oh, we can certainly share it. Yes, no problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because this will be a good way to incite new students to come, and also fundraising.
Yes. Well, I'm working on a more finalized version, which is the version that hopefully we can find a moment after November 15 to discuss. And this will be really the version that will be useful for fundraising. So maybe, this is really a work in progress document. But I can share this anyway.
Thank you very much. This was truly impressive. I think we are all here in the room, the younger ones, and especially the older ones. Everybody was wondering after Philippe went how things would go. I believe, madam, you are the right person in the right place at the right time. Congratulations. This is very impressive.
Thank you very much.
This said, I have a few questions and perhaps a suggestion. I have not understood the difference between a research center and a specific field of teaching. For instance, I have noticed that there is a new specialization, and I welcome this, on international humanitarian law and human rights. That's very good with not only the ICRC in Geneva, but quite a few other organizations that deal in that field. But what is the specificity of a research center versus an area of specialization? I have another question. I was struck by the fact, you didn't mention it, but it was on the screen, that 25% of the students are employed by the Institute. That's quite remarkable. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Then on the 4 Cs, which is a very interesting approach, and one can see your background in all this approach, I must say. On the field of collaboration, on the C of collaboration, I'm missing a kind of a map which we could have next time, which would sort of draw the line between, looking at the map of Geneva at least, the various learning centers or teaching centers and the various Geneva-based institutions. If I take what I know, for instance, the ICRC, there is a line between those who teach humanitarian law and the ICRC, but there is also a line between the Department of History and the ICRC, to the extent that the archives are open. And I could take many similar examples with UNHCR, with, all of these organizations, not just the international governmental, but also the NGOs. I think this would give a very fascinating map of the true network which the ICRC, which the Institute represents. The lines may go also further. I mean, it doesn't have to stop in Geneva. It can go with the African Bank, for instance, or whatever. I say that because I've got this blonde hair in front of me. So you see the idea, and that could also be a tool, perhaps, in your fundraising campaign, so that people see the Institute from where they are, rather than as it sees itself. Well, I think that's all. But once again, I was very positively impressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I propose, Grégoire, you take the question on research centers, and then maybe, Kim, you say a few words on the partnerships, and also on your suggestion, which I find very interesting.
Yes, thank you very much. Is it working? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for your question. You will hear more about the reform of centers next year, but we've thought of the reform of the MIN program in association with the research centers, because research centers were oriented more toward producing research projects and expertise for the International Geneva, and less oriented toward programs within the Institute, especially teaching programs. And what we try to do is a coupling, not a merger, but a coupling between these tracks and the heads of tracks and the centers and the directors of centers, so that we can basically increase the research input within these tracks, so that students in these two programs, which are now one, the Master in International Affairs and Development, will benefit from the research that is done on the themes that they specialize in. On the side, there's been also, and this addresses your question about the employment rate, we also strengthen departments, and by giving them more control over the PhD students, because a lot of people who are employed here are doctoral students. We not only form MA students, but we form a large number of PhDs, and we've done a lot of efforts to give them visibility. Now you will see on the website, if you search people's category, you can scroll the PhD students' web pages, which didn't exist before. And so departments are here also to really create this new generation of researchers who are within departments and centers. So we have this triad, the MIN program, the departments, and the centers that need to collaborate more on training this new generation.
Thank you very much for your observations. And I think what you mentioned about the ICRC is reflected in many, many other organizations in Geneva right now. What Marie-Laure has mentioned, that the world is becoming increasingly complex and interdependent, is something that many organizations are grappling with, because all of a sudden the departments and the way they organize themselves as institutions is no longer, or is not necessarily, the most efficient way to deal with all this complexity. And hence, here, you mentioned the linkage, of course, here with the ICRC on history and law. We are coming even in a more interesting strategic space for the Graduate Institute. Because as institutions, the 40 international organizations which are based in Geneva, the multiple hundreds non-governmental organizations, and of course the 170 missions, but also many of the companies, they're all trying to make sense of complexity. They're looking for a space to connect to the issues which are not theirs. So, for instance, an organization like the World Trade Organization looks to us, not necessarily, but also because we have great expertise on trade, but they look at us as an entry door for making sense of the linkage between trade and health, on the linkage between trade and conflict, on peace. And this is the type of strategic positioning of the Institute in international Geneva through partnerships that we are trying to, I think, which underlines also the strategic visioning and the mission. Because with all the conversations I have in international Geneva and also beyond, in the other centers, be that the UN centers from New York, Vienna, Nairobi, and others, but also the other new multilateral centers that are not UN multilateral centers, but that are part of this new polycentric world. There is a lot of value for us to work on the whole range of topics which make up international and global governance right now. And I think this is where, through the partnership strategies, through also spaces like La Fabrique de la Paix, we are positioning ourselves in a tremendously positive way to respond to a need out there for wanting to understand what is changing in the world, and also for finding constructive solutions which the world needs.
Yeah, if I can add two things on this. So one thing is, the last 20 or 30 years or so, and this is a trend that is parallel to the Institute and to the international organizations and to the world in general. There's been really this sense of specialization, okay, this thematic specialization. And we are all realizing the limits of that today in terms of addressing the global challenges of today, which are definitely by nature totally intersected, interconnected. And so I think that what our responsibility is, and because we are nimble, we are an academic institution, we have to take the lead on this, is for ourselves to force ourselves to be even more transdisciplinary than we are. So we are transdisciplinary, but we need to walk the talk even further. Be trans-thematic. So, and this is really one of the objectives of the transformations or the reflection on research and on research centers and this connection between research centers and the MIN program, etc., or with a PhD, is how do we actually make use of this amazing breadth of interest, thematic interest of the Institute, not only by becoming the great place to go to talk about global health, but becoming the place to go when you actually want to talk about all those things interconnected, health and environment and trade, finance, etc. All those things are, so we need to ourselves walk the talk of this and be, in a sense, a bit of a aiguillon, or kind of a champion of this kind of approach also for our partners, international organizations, NGOs, etc. So this is a bit the intuition that is behind the transformation. Not a radical revolution, really, but it's really about taking the next step that it makes us even more relevant in the world of tomorrow. I really take on your suggestion, which I really like, and we have just to find the competences for this, either in-house or outside, to represent visually. There are those amazing tools today to represent visually networks. So I think it would be great if we could visually represent where the Institute stands with respect to different sets of networks and put that in our fundraising PowerPoint. Definitely, I think it's a great, great idea. Thank you. Do we have questions online? No? You want to say something? Grégoire? Yes, you can. I know you guys can always say something. Do we have a question in the room, or otherwise I give them the word because they will have a lot to say.
Should I?
Yes.
Yeah. Just perhaps a word on the network value, because we have at the Institute a tremendous wealth of connections through the centers, through our students, through you. Through the alumni, and also through the partnerships that they have that want to collaborate with us on the teaching, on the research, and also on the role of the Institute as a platform. So I think those who are like me here, and like many of you for a long time, we know this network value. Also within Switzerland, with the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs and other federal entities at the cantonal level, and with many types of spheres. So I think there are ways to make these the networks visual. And I think we'd be tremendously surprised how well networked we are, and how we can work on these networks
and
through network nodes and leverage them. Yeah. Exactly.
Grégoire, you want to have few final words? So, the final question, yes?
So, can you hear? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
There is a question from Yui Chui. She asks, what would be the ratio for MA and PhD students in the coming years, and what's the vision on your student career services? Thank you.
Okay, so let me take the figures on this, because I think they're more or less the same thing this year as they are in general. So we have, out of the 1,300 students, we have 364 PhD students and 934 master students. Obviously, the big program in terms of the numbers is the MINT program, and that's really the big intake, but we also have the 5 disciplinary masters and the PhD students. But the ratio is this, and it's more or less stable for now. So career services, for me, this is really something also, you know, that's probably coming from where I'm coming, so it reflects my past, but it's going to be a very important, as I mentioned, one of the 4 elements is professionalization. And placement of our students, so we will have to invest on career services. So this is definitely something that will be part of the development projects of the Institute, but for development we need funding. You have to realize that when I arrived, actually the Institute, because of the COVID year and the investment that was needed to actually move the Institute from one day to the next or nearly into a fully online version of itself, which obviously implied a lot of investment. So when I arrived, I found the Institute with a deficit, a high deficit, in fact, minus 2.8 million. So this year we've managed to go back to, fine, we're fine. And this has been done in 1 year. So the next step is to find the means to develop a number of things, and definitely career services for us is extremely important because our students are so amazing that they really need all the help they can to find the positions that they deserve. So we are very aware that we could do much better on this than we are doing now. So, but this is really connected to a lack of resources on that. So it will be part of our strategy, definitely.
There was a question according to which 25% of the students are employed by the Institute, and I'm not sure that it was answered. Could you expand on it, please?
Yeah. So we are employing our students in different ways. The main share of this is obviously teaching assistants amongst the PhD students, but it can also be obviously research assistant connected to projects in different research centers or projects that faculty members are developing. And then we also have more marginal, but nevertheless also there, a number of students who help us in the administration, and this is mostly master students. Some of them are working in the library, for example, and others are working and helping us with the residence and different parts so that they can also benefit from the money that obviously comes from this. So this is a mix of that, but the main part is really the teaching assistant in the PhD programs and the research assistants. So I think we are reaching the end of this session. Again, warmly thank you for being here and online. Really happy to meet all of you, to get to meet all of you during the afternoon, and very happy to go on with the discussion at any time during the day. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Those here who had the courage to leave a beautiful sunny afternoon behind to get inside this equally beautiful conference hall that we have, I can say, because I feel part of the Institute. Thank you, Professor Mallard, for that introduction. Also to say hello for those who could be connected online. These days we have 2 audiences, an unseen one and one that we face. So I want to acknowledge you as well. As Professor Mallard said, the remit, the mission of the IEA covers an incredibly important spectrum, because we go from nuclear weapons or the non-proliferation thereof to climate change and nuclear energy, what happens with nuclear energy, or even less known for many, and I would like to tell you a little bit about that, aspects like nuclear medicine, radiotherapy, We are the ones that are calibrating, setting standards all over the world for nuclear medicine, or through the applications of nuclear techniques, working on weather-resistant crops, irradiating food so it doesn't go rot, or even zoonosis and pandemics. So perhaps I can tell you a little bit about that, and you will discover maybe angles that you ignore. First of all, the headline news, what we are known for. Basically, when something is happening or something is going wrong in certain places, you were referring to the Nobel Peace Prize that the agency got in 2005 that was related to Iraq, or what had happened in Iraq. And today we are still dealing with an ongoing situation in Iran. And before that, there was Syria and Libya and North Korea, the DPRK. So these are the political issues that make us be known as the nuclear watchdog. The nuclear watchdog. Some of my predecessors used to say, no, we are not a nuclear watchdog. Well, I sort of like that, because when it comes to nuclear non-proliferation or proliferation, I'd rather be feared and I'd rather be respected by proliferators. So it's not that bad that people will say, well, there's a nuclear watchdog over there, so if I want to proliferate and to have nuclear weapons, it might be difficult. But of course, there is this other huge, and about these political issues, maybe we can discuss in the questions and answers or your comments that you may have on what is going on, because for those following these issues, you may have seen that when it comes to Iran, of course, this is an ongoing matter. That is the return or not to the agreement struck back in 2015, the so-called JCPOA. I don't want to get too much into the jargon of these things, which are horrible, but this agreement between Iran and the P5 plus Germany, under the coordination of the European Union, this agreement that was unilaterally abandoned by the Trump administration, and then now we are struggling with this issue and seeing with Iran whether there can be a return to that. The agency, without being a party to that negotiation, is the guarantor, if you want, is the inspector. So we are like a permanent presence and a technical advisor of the negotiations, and perhaps if a deal is done and a return to the JCPOA is achieved, then we will have to be carrying out more inspections than the ones that we carry out now, because we are present in Iran. But there are a number of outstanding issues and problems that, if you are interested, we may discuss later on. But that is, of course, part of the day-to-day political agenda. But there is more, and there is more that allow us to think about the problems of the day and what this agency can do about it. One, of course, is one of the fundamental problems we have in front of us, which make some of you be wearing a head mask. And I have mine also here. Who would have said or thought that we would be in this situation? And the IAEA is working on this, because through the application of isotopic tracers, we have for a very long time worked with the FAO in Rome, the Food and Agriculture Organization, working on zoonosis. And when this happened, I was barely 3 months in office. I gathered the teams, the scientific teams of the IAEA, and then we devised a program called Zodiac, for having a catchy acronym. It means Zoonotic Disease Integrated Action, and we are working with 140 countries already now, helping their veterinary labs apply these techniques to be earlier on the ball, as one would say. Because here Geneva is of course has been and continues to be the center of attention, of course, through the work of the WHO. And by the way, of course, in this project we are working very, very closely with WHO. Not only with WHO, but also with a less known international agency, which is the World Animal Health Organization, OIE, which is in Paris. So we are doing this work as well, which is of great importance, and trying to work on the field with this. So zoonosis. And what about climate change? You've seen and here I know this, for those who follow the energy debates, this will have a lot of interest, because nuclear energy evokes passions. Somebody was showing me a video yesterday. I suppose here as well was one of those Fridays where young people demonstrate for the climate and against global warming, which is very good. It's one of the most interesting manifestations of societal change that we have. And somebody showed me this footage of, I suppose, somebody who was a bit of a provocateur, but someone went to one of these demonstrations in Germany and lifted a plaque saying, "Climate change, use nuclear energy." This person was beaten up by the other demonstrations. Of course, in Germany, passions run very, very deep on the issue of nuclear energy, and this has even socio-psychological aspects that go back to the missile crisis and to the 1980s and to the Greens and the strength of the Green movement in Germany. But just to say that this is something that evokes and elicits great passion. The issue from our angle is, of course, it is our mission to promote the safe and secure use of nuclear energy. The IPCC, you know what that is, the International Panel on Climate Change, in all the modeling that is developed by energy experts, looking at the goals that we have set to ourselves as an international community in 2030 or 2050 for total decarbonization, have concluded that without nuclear energy, you simply don't get it. You simply don't get there. And this, of course, is cause of great debate in itself, because some people have these, I would say, as I was saying, emotional feelings about nuclear energy. But the reality is that nuclear energy, I like to say, is part of the solution. It's not the panacea, of course, but is an important part of the solution, because it is, especially in big economies, it has a very important footprint in terms of energy. In the United States, it's 20%. In France, it's almost 80%. In Germany, it used to be like 30%. Now, still, with the Energiewende, with the phasing off from nuclear to other sources of energy, still 11%. Here in Switzerland, where you have a phase-off of a kind, in a Swiss way, because there's not going to be more new nuclear build, but the nuclear power plants that are operating are allowed to continue, and some of them have just been extended to 60 years and beyond, which means that there's going to be nuclear energy around for quite a long time. Belgium, 40%. I'm talking about Europe. I'm just talking about Europe. But what's most important is what's going on in the areas where nuclear is really growing a lot. And this is Asia. This is Asia. In China, as we speak, they are building 22 nuclear power plants, new nuclear power plants, apart from the 23 or 24 they have already. And with this, they are covering just 4% of the energy they consume. To say how coal, carbon dependent they still are. The same applies to India, the two countries that are often mentioned as countries that are problematic in terms of the CO2 emissions. So the IEA is at the center of these debates from the angle of nuclear energy, since, as I'm saying, nuclear energy is bound to continue to play a role for quite a long time. We are not nuclear lobbyists, but we promote their safe and secure use. It is through our safety standards that the IAEA sets for these activities that countries must work. And the same applies to security. You have the two things. One thing is safety and the other is security. Safety is that the nuclear plant operates without a Fukushima or a Chernobyl, without an accident. Security is that you prevent terrorists or whoever getting hold of nuclear material and using it for terror. So it's the two things, and here the IAEA is the international body looking after these things. So I'm going to be in Glasgow in a few weeks, as you know, COP26, the Conference of the Parties of the convention, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, is going to take place there. And of course, there are going to be interesting debates with the renewable sector, ourselves and others, and the countries that are trying to negotiate their political commitments and the political compromises that they must get to if they want to get this right. So I mentioned non-proliferation first and the political issues around it. I mentioned how we work fighting the pandemic, for example. I can also mention, and this is, I think, important, and I alluded to it very briefly in the beginning. We all know or have been touched by, in our families, by cancer or ourselves. And of course, radiotherapy is at the heart of this, and it's the IAEA which is supporting this work, in particular in developing countries that often don't have neither the equipment to give treatment and cure cancer, nor the ability to calibrate them so to avoid burning patients in the process, as you know. And all of this we do. One of the, and I hope if one day you come, let me know, and we will show you, the IAEA is not only a building with bureaucrats pushing paper. The IAEA, the uniqueness it has as well is that it's a big compound of laboratories. In the outskirts of Vienna, 40 kilometers away from Vienna, there is a huge campus where we have all these labs doing these activities. We have the labs that analyze the samples that we bring from hotbeds of tension to see whether there is uranium particles, and there could be some illicit business ongoing, but we have the labs where we develop cure for crops and other things. The other day, just another anecdote, the 5 foreign ministers of the Andean countries, the Andes in South America, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, this part, they called the IAEA for help because there is a new fungus that is attacking the banana plantations, which are in the case of Ecuador, is the main source of exports and foreign currency. And there are nuclear techniques to attack this. And examples could multiply in this regard. So to show you how incredibly fascinating the work of a place like the IAEA could be these days. At the end of the day, it is about a multilateral approach, which is science-based, which has policy and normative dimensions as well, and we can discuss about them, and which, as I say, is trying to be an effective tool to address these challenges we have. As I said, pandemics, climate energy, and matters of war and peace through its non-proliferation mission. So I hope this quick description, this tour d'horizon, as we say in French, will whet your appetite for a discussion, for questions, and I would be delighted to answer to them if you have them. Thank you very much.
Very much for this fascinating presentation. So before we open the floor to the audience, let me ask you 4 questions, maybe in another order than the one I told you before, because it strikes me that in your talk you emphasized the issue of how important it is to make links between issues.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you can also tell us something about maybe the importance of this approach for an international organizations, and maybe also address the question of whether there are some risks that an international organization may enter into issues that are more politicized than others. And for instance, in the case of climate change and the role of nuclear energy, this is a contested debate. You mentioned the German context. There's also the question of nuclear disarmament, where the IAEA has taken a role, especially with the JCPOA in the Iranian context, or could take a role in future negotiations of a WMD-free zone in the Middle East.
Yes.
So what is your take on this question, whether an international organization should try to make links between issues or should restrict to a sort of silo type of approach?
Well, it's very interesting because in all of these things, there are lots of politics in everything, and of course the issue of the pandemic is obvious, and it's the matter more of the WHO. Although in our case it has been discussed when we started this work, but I would say in general, setting aside the politicization of the pandemic, in all the other matters, there is, I would say, a relatively clear separation between one and the other. There are, however, 2 where politics are at the center of it. One is, of course, the non-proliferation aspect, where what I'm faced with, for example, very, very often is that when I take a decision or I do something in Iran or with Iran, I'm accused of politicizing. Well, why is the Director General doing that? Why did he say in his report that this and this thing happened in this place and this should be investigated? You are politicizing. Well, it's not true, but it is true in a fundamental sense because it's about politics and the politics of a country that might be, I'm doing a technical job. So in that part, it is impossible to separate, the elements. In the case of climate change, it used to be more technical. Now it's politics and it's also money. All right, so which is another dimension of the same thing, one could say. But here, what we see is that there is a ferocious fight around issues related to energy and energy sources, and what stance you take on one thing or the other, where you can see politics on the one hand, because there are the issues that we are familiar with, the energy autonomy, independence, gas dependence or oil dependence, and here in Europe this is a very clear debate, or renewables, or less renewables, more renewables. So it used to be more of a technical debate, which has been polluted, if one can say that, and now there is no separation possible anymore. And this has to do, of course, with the economy and the finance of countries, when we look at what is necessary or what is not. This week we had very interesting definitions about it. China, for example, saying that it's not going to build or to help build coal power plants abroad, not at home, abroad. This is important still because they are doing this a lot in Africa, for example. So what's going to replace that? We've seen in the space of 4 weeks, people were saying last year, gas is so cheap that you don't need anything else. Price of gas has gone up 700% in a matter of weeks. So here you are in the middle of something which is absolutely politicized.
Thank you very much, and it gives me a perfect transition to the next question, which I wanted to ask you, which is about the changing facets of leadership as head of an international organization. You've been in heading many international organizations, from the Nuclear Suppliers Group, which has a specific, which is a specific type of organization. Some call it a nuclear cartel, in the sense it represents the exporters and to try to set up export controls that ensure non-diversion of nuclear technologies, to the IAEA, which is an almost universal organization, and you've had a long career where you saw different international environments, and a lot of the talk today is about the return of great power rivalries. So as the head of this organization, where do you see leadership and opportunities to exert leadership? Is it in the fact of starting new research programs? As you said, the IAEA is also an incubator of science-based programs. Yes. Is it about trying to give time to diplomacy, as you've done, I would say, 10 days ago when you went to Iran to start to create a compromise about the reinstallment of monitoring devices so that diplomacy can go on elsewhere? And relatedly, for an institute like ours, what do you foresee as the next generation's leadership skills that we should foster in them today as they are students?
Yes. Well, I would say, first of all, that one should never lose faith in the ability to change things. You may have circumstances where things may be more difficult to do. You may have, of course, because in an international organizations, as somebody would say, where are your divisions? So your power is of a different nature. But if you choose to exercise it, you can do things. Let me give you examples, because examples are say it all about from ideas or phrases that you profess. Or in the case of Iran, we were in a stalemate now, and even before that, the JCPOA was, in the negotiations were stopped. The attitude that Iran was taking was making positions crystallize. Well, and I went to Tehran. Nobody came to me and said, Mr. Grossi, why don't you take a plane and go there, or call me suggesting this? I thought it was the thing to do. It doesn't mean it will always work. You can fail. Or, as I was saying with the pandemic, on the contrary, I had to explain what the hell was the IAEA doing with COVID-19. No, this is for WHO, this is for but of course, neither WHO nor FAO believed that, because they knew that we were working with them, and we came with something that was interesting. I could have stayed home and not do anything about it, and nobody would have held me accountable for that. They would have said, no, I mean, IAEA does the nuclear thing, and of course, the pandemic is for... So, of course, you have to be prudent. It's highly political, and we live in a very divided world, like you were saying, without some certainties of the past. The new situation is in a state of flux, so one has to do it with a lot of clear-sightedness and political vision and prudence, because you cannot crash the whole thing onto a wall. But I think we all, women and men, we have the ability to influence things, even if you are not a superpower. We have the ability to pull certain levers and do stuff. And sometimes this is exactly what these big actors need, to change course or to do something different, where you bring this link because you don't have a dog in the race, or you have one, which is peace. But you can provide this space where they can meet. As for what the Institute and academia in general do, I think the question is excellent, because I believe that we have no other choice but to have multidisciplinary approaches. If you want to be effective internationally, and I have the great privilege to lead a team of chemists, nuclear engineers, lawyers, sociologists, etc., etc., etc. So I think that working in this way, you can be more efficient. And I believe that this house, our institute, has, I would say, Director, I think, I would say, a moral responsibility, because we were created, this house was created to be the knowledge close to the UN. There's nothing else in the world like this. And the idea was so powerful to have this place, which is not part of the thing, but of course there's a lot of brassage, there's a lot of touching, and there's a lot of proximity with the UN, which is unique. Coffee was an alumnus, and some of us, others, came here. I came as a diplomat. I have the Argentine ambassador there, and I came to the mission he leads now. Of course, he was much younger. Now he's the ambassador. But when I came, I suppose he was in kindergarten or something. But when I came, I said, I want to go to HAE. Is it still known as HAE? I want to go there. And the reason was that there was this interaction, there was this interplay. I knew that the faculty would know what these international organizations were doing. And when you go anywhere else, and I have the privilege of being invited to give talks like this in many places, in many schools, you have to explain lots of things that here for you are no. It's you don't need to. understand. You are in Geneva.
Thank you very much. I will ask you one last question before opening the floor. One aspect also of your career is that you signal a strong commitment for gender equality by becoming a gender champion, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And my question, and you had public statement emphasizing the need for science fields like nuclear technology and nuclear science to reach gender parity. You also lead an organization that sends a lot of men, but also women on the field in sometimes difficult contexts where gender might become the cause for becoming targets. And so I was wondering how, as both head of a large organization and also promoting values, you think you can achieve these goals, and what sort of steps you can
Yeah, I would go a little bit back to one of your questions before, when you were referring to the leadership and the ability to do things. And here, this is precisely one of the points where you can do a lot. In the case of the IAEA, we are in the area of STEM. And you know, this is a very problematic area in terms of gender parity, where we see that a third, or around a third or less, combining professionals and students and researchers of STEM people are women. In engineering, the figures are so dismaying: 8%. 17 Nobel Prize in Science were women against 572 men. So what do you do about this? You say, no, it's because women. No, you have to change this. You have to change this. So in our case, what we did was the following. The IAEA was doing bad, really bad. Really bad. When I came, we were around 27%, 28%. So I said, 2025 is 50%. So I say, you are crazy, the DG is crazy, or he's a demagogue. Yeah, he's Latin American, of course. He's saying that, then people will forget. Well, we are already at 35% in barely 2 years. Of course, this is incredibly difficult. It's difficult on the one hand because you may have less candidates, but it's incredibly difficult because all the combination of unconscious bias that exist over there. So I would have people, very honest colleagues, that would come after the recruitment. I don't know how is this for you, but in an international organization, it's very complicated. And there's the politics, you have the countries that want to be there, etc. So at the end, they would come 4 men. And I would say, no, go back. And they would say, no, it's impossible. There are not enough women candidates for this. So you have to establish the right channels of communication, the right outreach, work with organizations that exist. There is something fantastic called Women in Nuclear, WIN. There's a WIN Global, and there are different chapters. So I got in touch with them to the horror of the human resources department. And I said, well, talk to these people. Show them what we can do. And that was, and I would say, this is the easy part, because at the end of the day, of course, I'm under the scrutiny of member states. I have a board of governors, I have internal auditors, I have external auditors, you have a lot of eyes on what you do. So you have to do it right, transparently and correctly. But I would even say that this is the easy part. The easy part is appointing more women. And I would even say that there is the danger of hypocrisy here. So you put a couple of women there, you're fantastic. He has appointed these women, but what's going on with the structural problem that we have? And of course, we don't have the power to change all that, but we can do some things. For example, I established a fellowship called not very original, but in my opinion, inspirational, Marie Skłodowska-Curie. Marie Curie, 2 Nobel prizes in 3 years at a time where women could not vote, could not buy property, could not perhaps dine with men, and she did all that. So we established that, and I'm very aggressively asking countries that profess that they have feminist foreign policies for money. When I see the foreign ministers, I tell them, you have a feminist foreign policy? Where's your extra budgetary contribution so that I can have women, young women? We started with 100, which for a first was very good, and now we are augmenting. So it's an example, and we are not going to change this overnight, but to say, and this is why I was making the connection with your previous question, that you can address the issue if you really want, if you really have the idea that this is something where you can move the needle, or you can start moving the needle. And you were referring to the inspectors. Women are incredibly sharp inspectors. Some of my best inspectors are women. So this is why, and scientists as well, and of course in every specialty that we have in-house. It's an uphill battle. We have to train people, as I was saying. We have to change aspects of the administrative manuals in recruitment and so on and so forth. So it is an effort, but I am a very convinced gender champion because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you so much for these very inspirational words. I'm not going to monopolize any further the conversation. I have 10 more questions, but I think we should open the floor to excellencies or the public. Yes.
Thank you so much, Yvette Chernov. I'm an author and political commentator. So, straight talk. You should have been kicked out of Iran a long time ago, correct? The JCPOA fell apart, the US government withdrew. So, just reasonably speaking, you know, Iran could have said a long time ago, you know, you're no longer allowed. So how are you doing this? Because also I heard comments from a lot of US diplomats for the deal that you were able to do 10 days ago. And they were saying, well, Grossi did not come back with enough, you know, it was too little. But I think it's actually an impossible job because let's take a look at it. I mean, why is Iran allowing you still to be there? So what is your magic? What's the trick there?
Well, you know, in the case of Iran, there are like 2 levels of inspection that you can have. On the one hand, they are bound to, irrespective of the JCPOA and the deals they do with the big, you know, powers. By virtue of being signatories of the NPT, the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, they have to submit their installations to inspections. But the trick there is that we can only inspect what they declare. All right? So you declare, I have, you know, this table and where Professor Mallard is sitting there, and then you can go up there, and this is all I have. Remember Iraq. When Iraq, in principle, Iraq was, you know, in full compliance with the NPT and the inspectors, and 5 blocks from that place where the inspectors were inspecting, they were making nuclear weapons. All right. So that brought about the reinforcement of some of the legal abilities of the agency through the additional protocol and things like that. In the case of Iran, also these additional, they call them transparency measures, that you can go and visit more things and see and do a bit more. And this is what Iran suspended, because they said to the Americans, well, you left, so tit for tat. And you can even find some logic into that, although I don't subscribe that. I can understand the rationale behind that. So when that happened, That happened at the end of last year, when in fact the new government began. I have the theory that the new government in fact began in December of last year, because that was the time where the hardliner sector started passing legislation and dictating what was going to happen. And one of the things they did was, all right, so the agency can do the bare minimum. I'm simplifying, but the bare minimum. And the rest you cannot do. So I came in February, and that was very important, because I, talking to them and with them, we were able to agree that if they were going, or they were still thinking that they could eventually go back to the JCPOA, which they still today profess they want, if they get all the money and the sanctions relief they want, et cetera. What we discussed those days, and what I proposed to them, I said, listen, if you want to go back to that, with this reduced scheme that you're proposing for my inspectors, you will not be able to do it, because I won't be able to tell to the world that in these months you have proliferated. You have accumulated an inordinate amount of enriched uranium, or you have produced or fabricated ultra-modern centrifuges to do the stuff when nobody's looking. So why don't we agree that we can have some provisional things ongoing? I promise I don't take the information away, but I keep it under seals. And then if everything goes well, then we continue. And here again, showing your idea, your initiative. Nobody told me, why did you do this? But if you sit down with them and you propose something that could be in line or not incompatible with what they were doing, they said, okay. So yes, it is a bit technical. I'm trying to explain it, and I hope it is understandable, but to the great public, of course, they lost us at hello, because it's so boring. But the idea is to offer or to keep a lifeline. The thing is that this lifeline is getting thinner and thinner and thinner.
Right. Do you think that Biden can actually pull off a new nuclear deal? Because my theory is that Blinken is not Kerry. Kerry was able to pull it off. I don't think that Biden and Blinken are able to pull it off, which means that the whole principle of continuity of knowledge that you're trying to push every several months, do you see, how do you think this is going to play out? Do you think that we're going to see a JCPOA 2 during Biden's term?
Well, I think they're working seriously towards that. I wouldn't like to, speculate whether it's going to be a yes or a no. I think they are working seriously to get it. What I see, the positions they have, is a serious attempt to get there. Whether they get it or not, it's another thing.
We have one question in the room, and maybe we take the questions online afterward. Yeah, so 3 questions in the room. Should we take 2? So maybe the lady here and His Excellency.
Thank you so much for today's presentation. Very interesting, and always very happy to follow the work of the agency. One question I have is, given today's funding landscape and the global threats that we all are facing, some organizations, international organizations, are more open towards working with industry partners in joining efforts to fight this global threat.
Industry partners, you say?
Yes. And so I was wondering if you would be willing to share with us some thoughts from
Yeah.
the agency
Well,
perspective.
thank you for the question, because in our case, it's indispensable. This is indispensable, and it's also part of the evolution of the job, of the mission. I would say, in the past, the IAEA took some distance from, and perhaps rightly so, from industry, not to get too much or too close to it. Maybe ideas of conflict of interest could come into play and things like that. I don't agree with that. And precisely this week, we established something called the Group of Vienna, very original, where for the first time in history, I invited the CEOs of all the big companies that are, present and acting in the nuclear sphere. Examples: EDF, Westinghouse, Mitsubishi, SNC-Lavalin, Canada, Rosatom, Russia, CNNC, China, KEPCO, Korea, and so on. A few. And the idea behind this is, of course, not to lobby. They lobby by themselves, and I have nothing to do with that. But I think it is important that, faced with a kind of existential threat that we are having with global warming, with climate change, that there is a space where these people can come together, talk to us, look into the normative things where we can help, or the things where they should be more prudent in all of these areas, safety of things, because there is something important which opens another area maybe for analysis, which is the development of new nuclear and the small and modular reactors, which is the thing of the future for many reactors that are not as big as the ones we know we have now, reactors that are 300 megawatts or 200 megawatts, which are incredibly tempting for many developing countries because of the scale, because of the less capital intensivity that they have in the beginning, because of the ability to be placed in remote areas, and so on and so forth. So we created that. In my opinion, working, and again, we go back all the time to this issue of not having, I think, you can't have silos, I cannot be working on setting safety standards and not listen to the industry. Because they may have good points, or not, or they may want to cut corners, and we shouldn't allow that to happen. So in my view, this is an area where you have to, again, you have to be prudent, because I have my constituency out there, and it's 173 countries. So they need to be content with what I'm doing. But industry is an indispensable part of the business, of this part, climate change.
Yeah, thank you. And when you were posted here 25 years ago, Geneva was the heart of the multilateral effort on disarmament. Yes. And as you know, for over 20 years, Geneva lost that role. Yeah. And recently, with the summit of Biden and Putin, there was this whole idea of relaunching international Geneva International. And what do you think should be the next multilateral effort in your field? Because you talk about policy and normative approaches. So on the normative approach on nuclear energy, which do you think could be the next multilateral effort? And do you see Geneva having a role in that? Thank you.
Well, it's what is interesting is that I must have been very lucky, because when I was here, I negotiated not one but two treaties. Some of my colleagues, diplomats, they cannot believe it. They think it's like a... but Geneva, that Geneva was also coming from almost 20 years before that of, this I wouldn't call it an impasse of immobility, or after the NPT, basically, well, then there was the Biological Weapons Convention, but which was, now it's regaining importance, but those days. So a long time happened. A long diplomat that I once knew, very wise man, told me, it's, Geneva is like, like a dinosaur that is sleeping, and then some moment in this area, no? It, wakes up and roars and spits out a treaty or two, and then goes back to. I hope it's not the case, and you can see, Ambassador, something being negotiated in this area. I think Geneva has the Conference on Disarmament, and this is incredibly important. The fact of its existence plays a multilateral platform for negotiations is in and by itself of enormous importance. I think there are some areas where the multilateral Geneva could work. There has been interesting work, for example, on the prohibition of fissile material, which was an effort that was stopped at some point, albeit a lot of preparatory work had taken place. And there is more than that. There is conventional weapons. There is some activity, but I certainly believe that Geneva will roar again in the future. I do believe it.
Maybe we take two questions, and then.
Thank you for your today's conference. And to be honest, I'm originally a civil engineer before to join the school here in Geneva. And I was previously working on a specific project, which is the Hinkley Point C nuclear project in UK. Yes. And I'm just thinking that can we really use the word sustainability and nuclear energy? Because we never raise the issue of nuclear waste. In France, in my countries, we only know to dig and hide nuclear waste in a Bure by doing some shafts and tunnels. What to think of the future? How can we really imagine a solution?
Yeah. Nuclear waste is the issue. Yes, nuclear waste is one of the issues that are more frequently argued against nuclear energy. I think there what we have, and it's interesting, you're mentioning France, is that this is more of a societal issue than a technical issue, because the technical solution exists. Last December, I descended half a kilometer in an island in Finland, Onkalo, where a deep geological deposit is already in existence. It's already there, and it's in the process of being licensed, and it's going to house the waste, the high-level waste from a couple of nuclear power plants very close to that place, including one which is built by France, Olkiluoto. You may have heard about it. It's an EPR, big nuclear power plant. So the technical solutions do exist. But I think here what we are confronted with is an issue of a different nature, closer to what the Americans used to call, you remember, the NIMBY thing, not in my backyard. Okay, yeah, it's very nice, but not here. But here again, I would push the envelope a little bit and say that when there are adequate policies of informing the population, involving the population in a democratic way, you also find solutions. So much so that, for example, the next deep geological repository, as they are called, which is going to be built, is in Sweden, in Forsmark. And here you had two towns fighting like mad to get it, to get the project, to get it, because it's good paid jobs, is a community that is going to be living out of that maybe for hundreds of years. They were getting the information, the companies were doing the work in the right way, and this is what happened. I must say that this is still a hotly contested issue, all right? I don't want to give you the idea, I don't want to sugarcoat this. Technically, the solutions do exist. They are there. I see you're a bit skeptical, you're nodding, but they do exist. Of course, we can discuss later on if you want, technically, but you have alternatives that are viable and that are being brought online. This being said, there are many people who are not to be convinced. They don't want this. They have, you know, there's the NIMBY, there's the Simpsons, okay? And this, I'm not joking. There's this idea that nuclear, you know, it's like, you know, like a green, you know, gooey thing that is there, abandoned somewhere, the nuclear waste, and it's going to be killing us for generations. I am, for example, on the issue of waste, we are involved in something which is extremely sensitive politically, which is what to do with the water accumulated around the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, for example, where you have, again, a fascinating case of politics and science and environment and nature, all in one. And I suppose in the literature we're going to see, I hope, some brilliant scholar looking into this, because the intersections here are simply fascinating. Fascinating, because you have a technical problem, you have a geopolitical, very volatile situation in the Indo-Pacific, and again, nuclear, submarines. Anybody heard about that the last few days? And here is where, through information, through talking a lot, showing the scientific methods that you are going to use. I'm not saying you are solving anything, but the agency has been very active in this. We are working on this, and we are trying to provide the solutions. Thank you for your question, and of course, I take your point that it is a very serious matter, and of course, that needs adequate solutions.
I think we have a lot of questions, so why don't you ask your question, and then we'll go online and get a few questions.
Yes, thank you very much for your very interesting talk. I'm not an alumni of this institute, I'm a theoretical physicist, and I want to follow up on the waste problem. I have been on the board of an experimental group in Canada, which is called the Sapphire Project, and they have shown that it is possible in a laboratory environment to transmute elements. I know, as a standard physicist, we don't believe in that. I've seen the data, and it is possible. They changed their experiment in a company which is now negotiating with the Canadian government to transmute nuclear waste into elements which are not radioactive.
Radioactive, yes.
Would your laboratories be interested or open to these kind of developments?
They are aware.
Okay.
They are aware.
Thank you.
There are many. It's interesting, your question or your comment, and I thank you for raising this, because what you need is a solution now for the waste that you have now. But knowing that in this area there are, of course, changing, there is changing and there is evolution coming, because science never stops. And you will have, I'm sure, down the line, some of these things, including fusion, or including new types of reactors, like fast reactors that use much less fissile material, hence reducing the amount of waste at the end of the chain.
So let's hear the online questions.
So we have two questions. One is, how can we make sure that reactors are to be run safely in regions that are less stable, especially in terms of political stability? And the other one is, does the AUKUS represent a breach of the Non-Proliferation Treaty?
That's the what, sorry?
The AUKUS, AUKUS.
Ah, yeah, AUKUS. It's a bit an awkward AUKUS. Yeah, all right. We could spend a few hours on this one. So the second was AUKUS, and the first?
How can we make sure that the reactors are...
Well, bring the IAEA. And it's a bit of a joke. But we are working, of course, with there are 443 operating reactors in the world. 443 in 32 countries. We are present in all of them. And of course, that doesn't mean that we have an IAEA policeman. This is an issue of national sovereignty. And this is why there were a couple of accidents, because certain countries or certain operators were not observing the standards that are there for them to apply. This is an interesting area of evolution, in the sense that many are saying that we should have inspection power in the area of safety. And you were referring to my work on the Convention of Nuclear Safety in the past, and it's in terms of international law, is a very interesting case. It's an evolutionary area where it is still to be seen. But what we see is an increasing presence. We have the safety standards, we have all of that, but those are applied nationally. So countries are not ceding sovereignty in this regard, as they are in the case of nuclear non-proliferation, where I send an inspector, I find something that it's wrong, and of course I cannot do anything myself, but I report to the Board of Governors, and if the issue is bad enough, it goes to the Security Council. And it could end up in an Article 7 sort of situation, and we've seen that in the past. AUKUS opens a whole range of issues, because in the case of AUKUS, what you have is a country, Australia, that is a non-nuclear weapon state seeking nuclear propulsion for military purposes, which is different from having a nuke. But it is argued by some that the technology access that they could have might pose a proliferation risk. And this is where there is a debate, which again is political. I was informed about AUKUS as per diplomatic practice just a few hours before it was, not too much, before it was announced. And we had discussions with the countries. And I must say that in their announcement, you may have seen on TV, President Biden and the two prime ministers, they indicated that the non-proliferation norms would be observed. So the first thing I said the next day to the Board of Governors is that we are here and we are eager to start this conversation. What is the non-proliferation? And I leave it here because otherwise it's too complicated. But the non-proliferation problem that you have here, or issue, if you don't want to call it a problem, issue that you have is that when you have a submarine, you have to accept as agency that a good amount of nuclear material is excluded from inspections for quite a long time, because it's a warship and it goes in secret missions for months. This is one of the beauties of the nuclear subs, which can stay for a long time without coming up. and they are faster, etc., etc., etc. So what this has not happened before. So again, for international lawyers, a very interesting case because this has never been tried. You have the possibility in the comprehensive safeguards agreement that exists. There is a clause that says that if you want to do that, you can do it, but you have to enter a special arrangement with the IAEA. But it has never done before. Interestingly, and this is sometimes history has ironic turns, interestingly, a country that was very seriously looking into that in the late 1970s, early 1980s was Canada. Canada was planning to have nuclear subs. And there was one country that very forcefully came to the Board of Governors saying, this is a proliferation risk and it should be under the authority of the IAEA. And that country was Australia. To say that it's okay, it's a political decision, but one that will require, if we are to protect the integrity of the non-proliferation net, a lot of work. So we are going to start a technical conversation with our Australian friends and our American colleagues and our British colleagues to see to it that there is no proliferation risk derived from this otherwise interesting development in the Indo-Pacific.
May I ask the organizers how much time we have left, if we have time to get another question?
The time should be over, but I guess we have time for another question from the audience.
I saw there were a few people with their hands raised. If you have a loud voice, maybe you can speak, and maybe you can give the mic here for two last questions.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Nuclear is probably one of the fundamental energy for the future, for the energy transition, but as we hear, there is this problem with waste and security. Do you see any technology that would enable nuclear to blossom again?
In technological terms or in...
What would you think it would take for nuclear to be like in the 70s when it offered a lot
Yes, it's a very good question because that evokes the times where people believed that nuclear would solve the energy problem in the world, and then it never happened. I remember a very good, as always, cover from The Economist saying the miracle that never was, or something like this, talking about nuclear energy. I think it's a compound of issues where, of course, energy price has a very important role, and cost. So talking about energy price, there is a lot of consideration being given to the subsidy schemes that you have in countries, which is, of course, heavily tilted towards renewables these days, and rightly so, because of their good contribution. Also, the absence of a tax for CO2 emissions, which should be there. And the aspects related to cost of these big projects, which in some cases are prohibitive for middle-sized countries. And so this is why the axis of the discussion is turning to the small modular reactors or even smaller than that. So for that magic moment to happen, I don't think it will ever happen. What you will see, most probably, is growth. Growth is occurring. And here in Western Europe, the narrative may be telling you differently, but as I was informing you, nuclear is growing. Is it growing at the pace it should to help move the needle in terms of climate change? That is an open question. That is an open question.
And the last question?
Merci. Je poserai ma question en français parce que mes références sont en français.
Oui.
C'est à propos de l'organisation du traité d'interdiction complète des essais nucléaires, OTC.
Oui.
Ça n'est pas clair. J'ai peut-être une ou deux questions. La première, c'est ça n'est pas clair dans mon esprit quelle est la relation entre l'AIRA et l'OTC.
Oui.
Et puis, ma question suivante porte plutôt, j'imagine, sur l'OTC, mais si j'ai bien compris, il y a 8 pays qui ne sont pas signataires du traité sur les essais nucléaires.
Qui n'ont pas ratifié, oui.
Qui n'ont pas ratifié, plutôt.
Oui.
Oui. Ils ont peut-être signé, mais pas ratifié.
Oui, tout à fait. Mais il y a,
comme les protocoles
mais
additionnels aux conventions de Genève.
C'est correct.
Et dont les USA et la Chine.
Oui.
Et si j'ai bien compris, plus ou moins traditionnellement, ce sont les républicains qui s'opposent à la ratification aux États-Unis. Est-ce que vous avez une quelconque possibilité, informellement ou autrement, d'agir dans ce domaine, ou est-ce que c'est res inter alios acta pour vous?
Bon, merci, c'est une excellente question. Vous savez, l'OTIS a une organisation spécifique. Ils sont mes voisins, en fait. Le CTBTO, Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization, qui, en fait, est un État, je dirais, les traités, comme vous dites bien, n'est pas entré en vigueur pour l'instant. Il reste ces ratifications qui sont difficiles, parce que c'est des pays compliqués. Compliqués en ce sens qu'il y a des positions politiquement figées et des problèmes liés à la possibilité d'une ratification réelle. Mais c'est un régime qui, en fait, existe parce qu'ils ont un système international des monitorages qui est en place, les stations, etc. Donc, je connais très bien, comme je vous dis, il y a beaucoup de contacts avec eux, mais c'est-à-dire que ce n'est pas notre mandat. Donc, oui, on travaille très bien ensemble. C'est-à-dire que eux, leur mission, c'est de vérifier qu'il n'y ait pas des essais nucléaires. Moi, je n'ai pas ça. Mais il y a, lié à cela, il y a tous les aspects des vérifications, des non-proliférations, avant qu'un pays arrive au stade d'être capable d'avoir quelque chose qui fasse bon. Et c'est là qu'il y a une espèce de continuum entre notre travail, qui est le travail de non-prolifération, de contrôle, de prévention, et leur travail, que c'est celui d'écouter la Terre et voir s'il y a quelque chose qui a fait un bruit un peu bizarre. Mais on travaille très bien ensemble. C'est une petite organisation très technique, musclée, et qui est là, qui est co-située avec nous à Vienne. Il y avait eu la question peut-être à un moment donné quand les traités étaient négociés à Genève, et le traité d'interdiction. Et il y avait des modèles différents de vérification. L'un d'eux était de donner à l'agence atomique cette capacité. Après, pour des raisons politiques, etc., il y en a qui ont dit non, l'agence a déjà beaucoup, c'est un truc complètement séparé, et voilà. Et donc l'histoire a fini comme ça. Merci. À vous.
Écoutez, je vais conclure en français, du coup, comme on est passé sur notre langue. Je vous remercie infiniment pour cette présentation vraiment très, très intéressante. Et j'invite ceux dont je n'ai pas pu prendre la question à venir peut-être rencontrer Monsieur le Directeur Général après, maintenant. Et en tout cas, maybe a great round of applause for you. Thank you very much.